the meeting to order. Will the secretary take the roll call, please?
Well, and my apologies if my sound gets weird. I'm hiding from my family in the basement this evening. So I'm going to start with Madarima. Madarima Chakraborty.
I'm here. Do you not hear me?
I couldn't hear you.
We did not.
That's okay. I got you now.
Okay.
Virginia Bloom. Here. Suzanne Fairfax.
Here.
Colleen Burns.
Here.
Sorry, I'm going in order. Ted Foss.
Here.
Matt Fruth.
Here.
And Sarah Glavin is here. All present and accounted for.
Excellent, thank you. Decision to conduct a virtual meeting pursuant to all proper rules and regulations and state laws and executive orders. We are permitted to conduct our business via virtual format as we have done here via Zoom. Is there a motion to do so?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Seconded.
Everybody racing. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Will the secretary take the roll call of that decision, please, of that motion?
Madarima.
Aye.
Colleen.
Aye.
Suzanne.
Aye.
Virginia.
Aye.
Ted.
Yes.
Matt.
Yes.
Sarah's a yes.
All right, thank you, everyone. All right, next item is public comments. Is there anyone who would like to make a public comment? Sam, I did not receive anything via email or from the form. So do any of our guests wish to make a comment at this time? Hearing none, we'll move on to new business, which is review and discuss executive search firm proposals. As we received 7 proposals, of varying costs and experiences. Is there a sense of that people want to go down the list as delineated in the agenda, or is there does anybody have one that they feel that we can just want to put forward that they think we can just skip and we can do a quick poll? Is if there's anything that people want to just focus on a couple at this time.
Matt?
I think, yeah.
Matt, this is Ted. I have several questions
Okay.
about the executive director search. And should I go through my little list, or
Are these like kind of general questions, or are these specific to certain proposals?
some general questions? Because, well, the general question is that some of the proposals of the 7 of them, some of these people are library consultants, some of them are executive search consultants, some of them are national, some of them are local, some of them deal with issues of diversity and all this stuff. So I do have, lots of questions, but should we go like proposal by proposal? What would you like to do?
That was my question, was like, what is the sense of the rest of the board? Is do we just want to move through them as they're itemized on the agenda and just do a first pass through them, and then if we need to come back and down to 1 or 2 that we want to discuss further? Does that sound good, or is
I have a quick question, Matt, and
Sure.
I'm just wondering if this would help us structure things. Did anyone else kind of pre-review and score, or use any mechanisms to kind of catalog the differences between the 7?
I didn't score them per se. I sort of went through and looked at what my my priorities were basically like price, timeline, and diversity. And I just kind of looked at them from that perspective. But once I was like, I should assign numbers, I got way too overwhelmed with attempting to do that and was like, I guess I'll just go with like my emotions or whatever.
I hear you. And my question, I think, as we're reviewing this, I mean, for those who had the chance to pre-read, those maybe who didn't, I'm not sure, but I do think, to Virginia's point, there were a common set, I think, of evaluative measures that maybe we should agree on as we're looking at them, because what I don't want to do is take an inordinate amount of time kind of rehashing every one of them. Do we think, Matt, we could come up with kind of a common framework for the conversation, just to say, hey, based on, to Virginia's point, price, maybe strategic layout of the plan or timeline, diversity metrics, efficacy in this category of recruitment, like, just maybe, I feel like if we narrow the framework a little bit, it'll make this a more efficient process.
Sure.
Okay,
Would-
well, I actually have a list of questions which I can go through very quickly without looking at each of the proposals. And I spoke to Matt about doing this ahead of time, and he thought we should do it in public forum. But could I take like 2 minutes?
Let me say one quick thing. And yeah, I agree that it was just a lot to go through. What I ended up doing is, after reading through each of them twice, doing through 2 read-throughs of them all, I kind of grouped them into like 3 groups of by 1 of 3, which was not, you're gonna have to like drag me to agree to hiring those. 2 of 3, which was maybe I could do, and then 3 of 3, which was I like this firm. I'd be very comfortable with this. And so that's where I was. It was I had a couple that were no's for me, a couple that were could go that way. I'm open to it, and then there were some that were like, yeah, this would be a good firm. I would be comfortable and very comfortable in hiring. So that's where I was. I don't know if anybody else did, but yeah, we could go through Ted's thing. But yeah, because I'm trying to think of like the best way of going through 7 proposals, that if there were ones that we were all kind of like, we're just going to set aside because we felt like they were just a little too outlier, that we can just move on and focus on the handful that we think are the most viable. So Ted, if you want to go through your questions.
Yes, please. First, I don't think we could ever find another David Celeb, but that's okay. One, of course, one of the big questions was whether or not we want to have an Oak Park resident. The second is with Rashida and her initiative. We need to think about that. Third, as you know, we have had an issue about personnel issues, and David is dealing with that because as a board, we don't deal with that. But is this something that the new executive director or an interim director is going to have to deal with personnel issues?
That's their job.
Exactly. And then I think we have to think about an interim director and whether or not we want to just deal with the leadership team or have an interim director.
That particular item is not on the agenda for tonight.
Right. And then, of course, the issue of diversity. And the other is the fee. I mean, we had thought that maybe it would be 1/3 of what the executive director's salary would be. And a couple of people talked about what their fee would be. The other is that one of the people talked about DEI. And of course, they didn't deal with what that meant. And so I had to look it up, and it's not diversity, equity, and inclusion. It could be disability, equity index. I mean,
It's not the
really-
disability, Ted.
well,
It's the diversity.
Well, actually, no, DEI, when you look it up, it could be
I-
disability equity index, but so the
Cor-
DEI, they just didn't define it. So,
In the current climate, Ted, I think it's safe to default it as the diversity,
Okay.
equity, and inclusion.
and then we do have in our board a selection committee among us as the 7 board members. And I just need to know exactly who those people are, because we have Colleen and Sarah who are working on this.
There has not been identified any selection committee. With this
Okay.
group right now is the meeting of the whole to select we're meeting tonight to discuss the selection of the firm. If a selection of if we need to create an ad hoc committee, have a selection committee of board members and other stakeholders, staff perhaps,
Mhm.
that would be a discussion and a decision to be made subsequent to this.
Okay, and then second, the next thing is, as we're interviewing the people, will we have a standard questionnaire that we will ask?
That will be developed, that's something to be discussed and developed and
And
as part of this process.
Right, and then of course, staff input will be very important. Then, can we think about what the Oak Park Public Library's weaknesses are as we look
That would-
forward?
I would imagine that would be a discussion of our opportunity, our areas of opportunity of improvement, and the other things would be a part of this conversation.
And then as we look at internal candidates, that's an important thing. And then the future of the Friends Library.
The Friends is an independent organization and is not the responsibility of the director.
Okay, but I mean, it's just something that, as David had said, he does not want to leave the organization.
But it's not
Like-
his job.
Okay, great.
It's not his job.
And then as I looked at the various candidates, I'm sorry, the various RFPs, there are library specialists, there are diversity specialists, and there are Chicago area specialists. And it was very interesting to me to look at those 7 candidates. So that's all the things I was thinking about. I hope
Okay.
that helps.
Okay, thank you, Ted. All right, so
Just one
let's,
quick question, Matt.
sure.
And I think this is really, to be respectful of the leadership team that's with us on the call. I think Ted made an excellent point, right? Each of these organizations have different expertise, right? There are clearly individual organizations that are standouts in library recruitment, and others that frankly probably have a much better track record on identifying diverse candidates for leadership position at nonprofits that might not be as well suited to a traditional library role. As we are thinking about this work, I think it's very important to me that we're mindful that we're not looking for David, right? We're looking for the person who's going to take this library forward and take on this leadership team. So I don't want to assume that we need someone who has library expertise as the recruitment partner. But I also kind of wanted, if I could ask Billy or David to give kind of at a 50,000 foot view, the value or the importance of a recruitment partner that might know that library network, primarily because of some of the mentions that were made about accessing kind of candidates who aren't publicly looking. So that was the one, if the diamond that we're looking for is going to be someone who might actively be in a professional position at another library system, is there a real strength in any consultant having that pre-existing library network? Or is that something that any one of these firms could kind of get into that contact space? That was kind of the one question that I struggled with a little bit, to your point, Matt. I think it's easy to say, like, let's select someone who has an expertise in this space, but that we also know that this is an incredibly underrepresented employment group. So identifying someone who knows that network, is that truly something we need to take into special consideration or not, in the opinion of the leadership team?
Well, Billy and I have both talked about this, and I know Billy has an opinion on it, which I'll let him certainly give you in a moment if he wants to. My opinion is that it is important that whichever firm you choose, whichever consultant you choose, that they have a way, a method, a plan to reach as diverse an audience as possible, while making sure that they're reaching an audience that is an appropriate one for what you are looking for, a director of a public library. But when you, and I think, of course, any one of these is going to tell you that that they're prepared to do it, and that they can do that. I think part of it, again, is going to depend on what this board's priorities are regarding the qualifications or background or experience of the director that you want. For instance, given the conversations that we've had about the professional degree and the challenges regarding diversity within the profession, is it essential to the board that your executive director have a master's degree in library science or not? And again, I think you need to decide that. You need to have that conversation so that whichever consultant you choose understands something about the environment or something about the network or something about the pool of candidates that you're willing to seriously consider for the position. If it's, for instance, if it's very important that your next executive director have a master's degree in library science, I think at that point, then it probably makes a lot of sense to select one of the consultants that has a great deal of experience in public library searches. And there are 3 of the 7 that do. If, on the other hand, what is more important is finding a more diverse pool of candidates, and you're willing to consider executives without the master's degree in library science, then I think, in my opinion, it becomes less important. But there are other things to consider too. I think that if you select a consultant that has no experience in public library searching, I think there's going to be perhaps a greater learning curve, and it's going to be more important than ever for the board to communicate what your priorities and values are for the search process itself. For instance, how important is it to make sure that the voices of all of our staff members are heard? How important is it that the opinions and priorities of the leadership team are heard? How important is it that you hear the voice of the community and what importance they place on various qualifications for a director? So, if I were doing this search, I would probably be zeroing in on the firms that do have a lot of experience in library searches. And again, there are 3 of them in your list. I would probably be I would probably not be seriously considering a couple of the firms that have absolutely no experience in, at least as far as I can see, in library searching, are also perhaps might not prioritize the issue of equity as strongly as this board would, and are frankly on the higher end of the fee scale among the 7. So, I mean, I think it sounds like you've all been already thinking about how to narrow down your search, and I think that's great. And I think that you could probably get down to maybe 3 or possibly 4 of this list to seriously consider. And I don't know whether you're thinking about doing interviews or not at this point. And again, I know Billy has an opinion on this too, because he and I talked about it. Billy, do you want to share your opinion on some of this?
David, thank you for saying everything that you said. I feel like you covered what I would cover. And the only thing that I would add for consideration, and I know this is not a conversation about interim director, but an interim director, if we're looking at hiring an interim director, a firm which has experience with working with libraries may have a easier, faster time finding an interim for us rather than any other of the consultants. That's just something for consideration.
Because of the network that they already have at their disposal, because of their knowledge of the candidate pool, generally speaking, particularly in the state of Illinois. Not that your next director is going to come from the state of Illinois, because I think your potential candidate pool is going to be a lot broader than that. But yes, I think I agree with Billy that, again, there are a few firms here that have such deep experience, including in public library searching around the country, that indeed, if you are serious about finding an interim director from outside of the organization, they would probably have a much easier time, or at least it would be a matter of quicker work for them to find some qualified interim directors that would be prepared to step in and start helping to manage the operations while you're doing your search. So those are my opinions and thoughts. I hope they help.
David, am I understanding correctly that our need for an interim director would probably be related to whatever timeline they gave us as far, because one of the things that I noticed was that the timelines of completion are pretty varied.
Yeah.
And that might, if we're going with somebody who doesn't have that library network connection,
Right.
but thinks they can get this done by, I don't know, something crazy like April, then we might not need to consider getting an interim director. But if we are going to go with somebody who has a longer timeline, say June, July, that may be something that we have to factor in along with their library-based experience. Is that, am I interpreting that correctly?
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. Yes. And again, I've had this conversation with my leadership team. My leadership team has had this conversation with me. And while, again, I have every confidence that the 7 of them, 8 of them can step in, work together for a time and take care of some day-to-day operations and provide the board with the information that it needs. Once a firm gets hired, the longer that time goes on, the less I think fair it becomes to them to expect them to carry that weight and that burden and do that additional work. And so, yeah, I think if it's going to be on the longer end, and I expect that it will, I personally would be surprised if you at this point would find and hire your next executive director before the end of May. Maybe you will, I don't know, but that's what I think. So yes, I think it's going to become important to have that conversation with your firm right away and figure out what you want to do about an interim director.
Okay. So I think it's that thank you, David and Billy. I think that for me, that's very, feedback well taken. So I think,
Um,
go ahead, Susan.
So one thing that I just want to make sure that we're, again, thinking about is that there definitely are advantages for firms that have, more experience with libraries. I was noticing that. I'm kind of looking at for public sector and that sort when I was reading through them. But also to remember that sometimes the firms that are more established in a particular area may not support some of the work that we've already done a really great job moving forward at our library in terms of racial equity, diversity, and inclusion. So that's the thing I want, it's very easy for me to, and I think we all have this tendency to look for, oh, there's this exact experience. But we also have to look at what that exact experience and that being done over and over again results in. And if we want a different result, so it's just weighing those against each other. And, I'm just a little concerned that that some of them may not have the most forward-thinking inclusion strategies. And I only saw one that mentioned emotional intelligence, and they then relied on a test, which was a little bit of a red flag for me. So I didn't see any mention in any of them about transformational leadership. So just, something to think about, that just if we want a different outcome, that there's two sides to that, that's all. And it's tough. I'm really having a hard time reviewing them and making an assessment, because there is so much kind of apples and oranges here. And are we determined to kind of select one tonight?
If possible, I would like to get moving on this as much as possible, given that David is leaving at the end of the month. I would like to, I would, if we can't get it done tonight, I think we have to get it done at our regular meeting at the end of this month.
Yeah.
Matt,
In terms of-
I liked your perspective about, kind of narrowing the field. Are there, is there a way we could, in a constructive way, either highlight particular ones that people feel either below the line, like don't make the top
Sure.
consideration, to narrow this conversation? Like I'll be honest, like some of the 7 I don't think are worth us spending a lot of time on, in my opinion, but I also don't want to be disrespectful to anyone else's thoughts.
Sure. Well, I was going to start with that because I think the point that David brought up about whether we feel having an MLIS as a requirement for our next director is a point well taken. I think and whether or not that will focus on people who have, a much more in-depth and long track record of working with public libraries. So is there any sense amongst the 7 of us that how we feel about that? Is that something we want to continue to expect our executive director to have, or is that something that if the right candidate came with the right experience and the right perspective came forward to us, that is something that we would be, that you feel like you could not have, or as a person, be willing to set aside that expectation to have as our next executive director, that they would not have that master's in library science?
I'll go ahead and say, I don't think we necessarily have to have it. And I say that because I think in advertising this position, we will already get lots of people who do have it. And if we do perchance get someone who does not, they will know what they are up against with people who do have it. And there will be some sort of compensation in their background that takes care of the other requirements that we're looking for. I'd rather have a broader pool to pull from, or have a broader pool for, these consultants to pull from, and us say, nope, we got it wrong, we do need it, and eliminate those candidates, then like you said, miss out on somebody who we otherwise would not have seen at all, who maybe has some great experience somewhere that we can bring in that isn't library specific, but that would be very good for pushing us toward our other goals.
I also think, to your point, Virginia, there are individuals who, you know, I think we've seen incredible developmental talent out of individuals who even work in the system who didn't pursue, you know, maybe a traditional educational pathway. So whether that's someone who comes in through an academic background or management of another nonprofit or whatever that might be, I think to your point, that leadership experience, I think could meet some of the specifications. I'd much rather have someone who has an incredibly strong management background and leading teams and creating good cultural environments and competency in the anti-racism work than someone who just graduated with a master's degree in library science without those things. So I think that I don't want to go hard and fast there. I think for efficacy, like, and if we are, I know we're not talking about interim directors tonight, but I do believe that, and this is, I think, one reason I'm being conscious of the community of participants that have library backgrounds. You know, yes, I agree, Suzanne. I think I want them to be challenged and look outside of their regular loops of contacts. But at the same time, I think if we're narrowing, there was in my opinion, individual, one of those recruiters that I thought still had some very strong feedback in their presentation about how they were going to still challenge that, you know, that issue in their recruitment strategy. But not everybody. I didn't love all of the library consultants equally in my review. That's just my opinion. I don't know if anyone feels strongly in the other direction.
Well, Sarah and Virginia, I agree with that. And having been somebody who's been in libraries all my life and doesn't have what used to be called an MLS degree, and not to like denigrate the library degrees, I think that as we look forward and we don't think about residency or an MLS degree, we want to find the right person. And yes, I don't think the degree and residency is all that important. We just want to find the right person.
Right. And right now what we're doing is we're selecting this go-between who's looking for the right person. And that's, you know, that seems really significant. If we've got somebody who's screening and narrowing down and doing interviews, we need to really make sure that they understand the work that we've done and what our priorities are, and that what they're measuring things against matches as best as it can to what we're trying to measure. And I don't think the degree is my first priority.
Okay.
I think Virginia's point is right. We'll get plenty of that.
Okay. All right. Well, how about this? If everyone can, in a message to me, identify any of the firms that are out for you, where you're just, for you, they are ones that you just don't want to, you don't think measure up in some way or another, for whatever reason. And if there are ones that are, all 7 of us are saying out, I'll just say, okay, these are the ones that are clearly not, and I can show the counts afterwards.
Matt,
And yeah,
I'm sorry. I just think I feel like I need to caution you about asking the trustees to submit their opinions about any of these firms during this meeting in a private message to you. I think if you're going to poll them, I think you need to do that publicly and ask each of them to give you their opinions so that that can be a matter of public record.
okay, because I thought the chats, even direct messages, were still archived as part
Oh,
of
I'm sorry.
the-
I'm sorry. If you're at, yes, I apologize.
Yeah, in
If
the
you're
Zoom,
asking
in
them
the
to
Zoom.
put, if you're asking them to put their messages in the chat, as long
Yes.
as they're not just to you, then they will be archived
Even-
and available publicly. But even if,
Yeah,
but if they're only
Even
to-
direct ones in Zoom, even direct ones are
are
archived as
they?
part of a
Okay,
transcript. Yeah,
okay. I just wanted to caution you about being careful about that. That's all.
okay. Well, if you want to do it to me or you want to do it to the group or whatever you feel is.
I-
um,
I honestly would love someone who has had a lot of experience kind of reviewing RFPs to kind of give some input. I'm personally looking for some leadership there with people who've had that experience in their work life. Because I can have ideas, but it's not something that I have as much experience with as some others on the board. And I
And
would
Sus-
appreciate
and Suzanne,
it.
I absolutely agree with that. And I don't think that this is something that we can decide in today's meeting. And as David says, we can share these things publicly with people. And then we will give our answers as to why and how. And that might also help the 7 executive search firms to craft better their proposals. But I was hoping that at this meeting, we could just kind of figure out, okay, how do we go forward and quickly?
There's a reason we had an action item on the agenda, Ted, is we've already had an RFP window. David told us last year, and we've, taken we're already a couple months into since he gave us his notice of intent, and he's going away in a couple of weeks. I don't want to give up more time. If at all possible, I'd like to remind you, we were going into, when we picked Suzanne, we had a lot more candidates for that, and we had no idea what it was, and we actually got to that decision in under an hour. Of kind of filtering through all those potential people to come to the board. And I think arguably we didn't have as much information about some of them at the time. So I think this is something we can do tonight, because also that was something nobody on the board had ever done before. Nobody on the board had replaced a trustee. None of us had experience in that. So I think it's something we can do, and I would really like to see if we can in any way do that tonight, or get as close as possible to that decision. I don't want us to lose more time in this process, because as we've talked about it, unless we schedule another special meeting between now and the 25th, it's 2 more, or at the end of the month, it's 2 more weeks until we meet again, and we're pushing out our decision that much farther than we already have.
Just to be clear, I wasn't suggesting pushing the decision out. I was just saying that rather than you asking us which ones we want to nix, I personally would love to hear from someone who reviews RFPs on a regular basis, kind of how they approached it, and some input. Because that's not something
I'm
that
sorry.
we'll do.
Sorry, Susan. I was like, Colleen, I know you and I both talked about having some professional background in this. Do you want to kind of talk through your process really quick? And I'm happy to talk through mine to see if it's
Thank
helpful.
you. Yes.
So I scored them. There are ways of scoring proposals like this that are very easy, like price, easy to compare across all 7 or whatever it was. There are other areas that are less easy, and I think you've already hit upon several of them. So one of my scoring categories was innovation, and that kind of gets to your point about how you felt like most of these proposals, if not all, were kind of lacking in terms of demonstrating that what they're looking for is innovative leadership. So I think it's really important to think through those items. It's very easy. All of us have already looked at price and timeline. I'm honestly, I didn't score based on whether or not they had library search experience. I don't think of that as being as directly relevant for some of the reasons that have already been stated this evening, namely that if we're interested in finding somebody that's like not exactly what we've always been looking for, then we got to look outside of those normal channels. So I think I would actually rather hear from other trustees, including you, about those things that you were looking for, like those innovative leaders. I thought that was kind of lacking too, to be honest with you. DEI, I scored as well. There were some very weak proposals on that front. Creativity. So like when you think about approaching a process like this, like it's really easy to post on a job board, but like what else are you doing to try to make sure that you are looking in places that you might not normally find somebody that might be interested in a position like this, for what it's worth.
Thank you.
That's perfect, Colleen. And I was similar. I scored based on kind of the structure of the proposal, because a significant and as you think about what we're deciding, a big portion of this is really someone who's going to manage through this process and take out some of the complexity. So there were several proposals that just felt, very rinse repeat, right? That they didn't have good structure, or they weren't laid out in a way that was kind of easy to understand. So I did kind of a score on structure, on pricing, on diversity, equity, and inclusion, but not just we're going to screen for it, but like to your point, Colleen, how are we looking for candidates in any way that's not very standardized? I did feel like there was a lot of kind of deferring to, we're going to post on different boards, right? And you were like, oh, great. Like any one of them could have said that. And that's not working very hard to identify an individual who isn't, screaming that they're available, right? And then I did look at, some of their relevant experience, because to your point, while, some of these positions may be a traditional library professional who's now looking for a new opportunity, and we might find that they ring all these other bells. I thought, them having to navigate through some complex hiring processes with other organizations that frankly are far larger than us, with much larger budgets and probably much greater bureaucracy, like having that experience felt like a relative metric to me. So those were mine. So I did, I think to Colleen's point, that's why I was saying, hey, I'm okay going to Matt's conversation, either saying like, hey, these were my top 3 based on those. I don't know if everyone feels comfortable doing that. We can go the other way. If we don't want to cut people out, we can say like, who do we think was really of these? I was hoping there would be some that were stronger than they were. I also didn't feel like bowled over by many. So for what that's worth, I'm happy to kind of share the ones I thought were standouts, but I don't know if Matt, you want to handle kind of the review process differently.
Thank you, both of you. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Yes, was very helpful. Okay. So, well, let's, Maharima, you raise your hand.
Yeah, thanks. Hi. I have sort of a legal question about DEI and how that works, because of course there's one of the proposals suggested that we take away all identifying information, right, from the resume or something, so that we could have a blind or neutral, gender neutral, blind way of approaching these candidates. And before I just like laughed out loud and threw it away, I was just trying to figure out is there some legality that I'm not aware of that we would be bound by or something, because I know that some places you have to ask everybody the exact same questions, and and other places are more flexible about something like that. So I just, from that perspective, I wanted to know, like, are we are we bound to whatever it was, gender neutral process or?
I don't, David, I mean, unless you know, I don't think so, but it's,
I mean, what I would say is if that's the kind of process that you would want to use so that you are removing, and I'm guessing this is the consultant you're referring to in their proposal, what they're getting at, if you're trying to remove any opportunity or potential for some kind of bias from, at least from the beginning of your process, then I think you could do that. You would have a firm that would be prepared to make sure that they are, keeping that information confidential so that you're not seeing it, so that it's not influencing you in any way in the decisions you're making about who you're going to consider, as far as making sure that each candidate is treated equally fairly in terms of making sure that the questions that are being asked and what they're being asked to do to present their credentials that would be the job of the consultant that you hire, to make sure that that's done that way. Again, I think it's another decision that you might want to talk about and make once you've hired the consultant. Do you want to remove the potential for some kind of unconscious bias entering into your individual and collective consideration of candidates? And so you're going to ask the firm to sort of manage that for you, or is that not something that you're concerned about? But if you wanted to do that, and again, Billy might also have a thought or an opinion on this, but I don't see why you couldn't do that if you wanted to.
Well, I'm just sorry. Before we go too far into the conversation, I want to get on the record to say, I don't want to do that. I think it's a terrible idea.
Okay.
I think like pretending to be race and gender blind is a ridiculous understanding of like how we consider these factors.
All right. Well, there you go.
I was using that as one of the metrics to be. I was using that as a way to figure out what this firm thought an equitable process was like. I was using it.
Okay, I got it. Okay, I understand. All right. No, yeah.
But before I did that, I wanted to make sure that there wasn't like a legal thing that was binding them to it.
I don't think so. I think it's, again, I think this is, people have different opinions of this, obviously, but I definitely think it's a methodology that organizations are beginning to use, right?
Madhurima, if it's the proposal, I think it was, I agree. I don't know that it's the best idea, but I was impressed that they seem to come up with that list of things by researching our actual diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. So they may have gone a different direction than we would have preferred, but I was encouraged that it looked like they did a little bit of research on what our priorities were.
Yeah, but they sort of missed the point. I feel like they missed the point a little bit, but anyway, I mean, I didn't mean
well,
to.
If that's who we go with, we can always bring them back to point. I think. All right, let's go down the list of the as proposed as listed out in the agenda, and we'll have a brief discussion on each of them, and if it. By the time we get through all 7, if we have a consensus on what seems to be a consensus of a couple that seem to be standout, we can maybe go back and re-review and kind of do some comparisons. But let's go with feedback from board members on each of them. So we'll start with Bradbury.
Can I ask a quick favor, David? Can you pull up the RFPs and screen share them as we talk about them?
Sure. Yep.
Thank you.
Wherever you want to start.
Or we'll start with, we'll go down the list as I think is there in alphabetical order. So the Bradbury, Miller and Associates.
Yeah. Let me make sure. Are you still seeing the agenda at this point?
We are.
Okay. Let me. Okay. I just need to start a new share here. So just give me a second.
You had those lovely clickable links in them.
Yeah,
which I was
I
happy
know.
to
I just,
discover. After I'd done it
Now-
the hard way, I discovered that.
Now we see all of us.
I
Hi.
know. I know. I know. There we go. All right, so this is the Bradbury Miller Associates proposal. You see that?
Yep.
So. All right, does anyone want to start with their thoughts? As
And I have to tell you that I did not rank all 7. I just read all of them and I just made general comments. So I apologize.
that's fine. I mean, Ted, why don't you, if you have some comments on here on this, on Bradbury Miller, go ahead. Or anyone else?
I mean, I liked the library, extensive library experience. That was definitely a plus. And because it was the first one on the list, I thought they were all going to have that. So it was in hindsight, I think that I realized, I don't know, I thought it was a plus, and so it made me believe that the 3 to 4 month turnaround that they were talking about was one that was big, like they were. I believe that timeline because it seemed that they'd done this kind of a search before. Does that make sense? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
That 25K though, right?
So I liked that they mentioned nonprofit experience, not just library experience. I think that speaks a little bit to the point we were talking about earlier. Is the MLIS necessarily required? No, but it seems they have those library connections, but they might also have broader connections for people who will still have those management skills, but are also attuned to, working within a community, working with other community stakeholders the way other sort of nonprofits would. So I liked that. And to Madrima's point, them being sort of first on this list, I was like, this kind of set the bar in my brain. So I understand that I might have some biases set by this having been the first one that I looked at.
Sure.
I thought they were missing robust like staff involvement in their process. There was a lot about like working with the selection, the board process, but like less about like really digging in on what we were looking for.
Yeah, it didn't start with the let's find out what they need. And this was the one that had the red flag for me in terms of they were the only one who mentioned it, that I saw anyway, that I could find any mention of emotional intelligence, but they're leaning on this this Hogan personality assessment that to me was just a little concerning. And they had a little section that was like diversifying the applicant pool. And, saying Bradbury Miller Associates consultants know that both female and BIPOC candidates are underrepresented in senior management positions. And I don't know, just that the subtlety of the way they use some of the language, like we place announcements in a number of diverse library related websites. And diverse has gotten to where we use it that way, but it didn't seem very nuanced or full in their approach.
But to be honest, diverse and library, as we've discussed before, don't always dovetail so well together. So
Exactly.
yes, while
Fair
they're
point.
while they're pinpointing the diversity within the community, the reason that we've decided we may have to look outside of the library community is for diversity. So I was not impressed by them saying, we look for diversity in places where we've had to manufacture diversity.
Exactly. And just their familiarity, I don't know, just the way that they use some of the language around diversity just felt less nuanced than I would like to see.
I feel that way with most of them though. So I think,
Exactly.
you know, this, and that was, I think, part of what, as Colleen was saying, some of her assessment earlier, I think, you know, in any of these cases, and of those that had library experience, I at least appreciated that they talked about the framework for how they use, you know, referral information. They were in my, again, they were in my top half as well. Colleen's note there. I thought their structure was very clear. I liked the way that they broke down kind of the components of the plan. Again, I do think there was some lack of specificity around how they really do leadership assessment, and you know that they measure some of those competencies that we're all talking about needing to be far beyond kind of the website in which you're posting a position on. But I did feel like the way that they framed some of this also made me feel like they might be more open to specific feedback and direction from a recruiting, you know, dialogue with us. I didn't feel like their proposal was quite as rinse repeat as some of the others. So I would say they weren't my top, but they were in my top handful.
I agree, Sarah, that they're not saying what we want them to say here. I think they have the skills to do a serviceable job in finding us someone, if we're all willing to put in the work to really give them direction for exactly what we're looking for. I don't think we're going to get any help in crafting who we're looking for. I think we're going to have to give them the exact picture of what we want, and then they will be able to go and find it. But I don't know that.
I got that feeling too, Virginia.
Okay. Any other comments about Bradbury? Okay.
I had a regional question about all of this. It seemed like these were all Ohio folks. Like how does this work in terms of location and where they look and where we are? And is there something that I'm missing there?
Their list of Bradbury's list of where they place people. That was the one other thing I didn't comment. I was impressed with some of the library systems they had done work for. Like they've done Broward County, they did Denver. Like they've done some pretty significant markets that I anticipate have similar demands to a library that has, I think, the community engagement levels that we have in Oak Park. So I think you're going to find that with any of these groups. I'd almost rather somebody have the proficiency to operate nationally than someone who's hyper local and may not have that long lens.
Right. No, I wasn't necessarily looking for them to be local. It was more that they're in Ohio and would they, you know, that it's
that's all built into their fees.
No, more like just in terms of perspective and what we're looking for. And
Suzanne and Sarah, whenever I travel, I go to public libraries, and I've been to the libraries in Ohio and Colorado, and the librarians are wonderful. So I don't know that we need somebody who is hyper local. And of course, Colorado, Wisconsin, Ohio, they all have their problems. So I think that a national company it's not bad. We don't need hyper local.
Oh, I wasn't looking for hyper local. I just had a bit of a bias against Ohio, to be perfectly honest.
My brother-in-law went to Michigan, so I you know, so okay. Then going next to Carrington and Carrington. Any specific comments or?
I didn't see any mention of public sector or library, but there's nonprofit sector. You know, the mention of Howard Brown, there's some some affinity with that, but.
A lot of healthcare,
Right.
a
But
lot of
that,
colleges. But not even like, but for me, it was like, not even as much as academic libraries are different from public libraries, didn't even get like academic libraries in here. It's a lot of,
or other public sector.
or other public sectors, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, those, there is a unique, I mean, they, in my mind, there is different in the, sense of leadership scale and, and what their missions are, but again, we're the client, and how much of what they're going to find is driven by us and what we want, and that, but it's also I'm not going to lie, part of me is like when all of these industries and places are all huge by comparison, it's like if they're taking on other clients that are in that scale, I feel like we're the small fish, and are we going to get overlooked? Are our needs going to get overlooked in that in that big tank with all of these other gigantic clients? I mean, to be honest, big clients that they are working with in terms of the size of those organizations.
I looked, and I mean, initially I was very excited because, they do specialize in finding diverse candidates.
Yeah.
But they specialize in finding, I think, more traditional executives. And I don't think we're looking for a traditional executive. We're looking for an executive who is in public service, which is different from, an executive sitting at the top of a, corporation or a insurance company, or, something like that. I don't, unlike the previous group we talked about, I don't know if we could draw a specific enough picture to find the person, to ask them to find the person that we want. Because I don't know that they have I don't know that they know where to reach for, to what Suzanne said, like into the nonprofit, I don't know that they have those avenues. It feels very much like they have lots of executive diversity experience in more corporate spheres.
Matarima, I have to ask you, in the chat, you have written, you think that the current library staff and leadership have ruined us? Is that what you meant?
Yes,
Yes.
we're spoiled.
We're spoiled. We're gonna.
Oh, spoiled. Okay, it
We're,
says
we're
ruined.
ruined. This process is
Ruined
like,
for others.
we're ruined for
Yeah.
others.
They've set the bar
Okay.
high.
Yes. But I also did want to say that a couple of things about this forum. One was that well, I mean, I thought that their definition of diversity and inclusion was better. I guess that's maybe not a surprise since they're a Black-owned company, but I thought that the fact that they were leading with that was what was important, that they, like, it wasn't just like an add-on, was good. I thought it was good. But I also saw that the lack of, it seemed very corporate, and I don't know. And I was actually kind of curious about why they were interested in pitching to us, like I mean, like, maybe they're pitching to everybody, but it was also, it seemed a little.
And Matarima, you need to spell check.
So, yeah, that's a fair point. It's like, and that seems to be that Matarima, you're like, it's like, how did they end up pitching to us for this? Does also seem to be a fair way of saying what some of kind of put it, into succinctly some of my thoughts on this. So anything else with anyone, or? Okay.
So that looks like that's one is out.
I didn't necessarily hear that. I mean, I didn't hear like, I want to keep talking about them, but I definitely didn't hear I also didn't hear that we want to dump them. But I did was
And
like,
Matt, for clarity, they came in through me. So I know a colleague who used them for an executive search.
Okay.
So I actually asked David to share it with them as an opportunity. A colleague of mine used them to hire their director of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
got it. Okay. That makes
And
sense.
was very pleased with them. So they asked if there was interest in us putting them in the mix. So I shared it with them. Just so you know that they look a little maybe less like their candidates in the pool. It's because they're a referral.
That context helps a lot, Sarah. Thank you.
And I'll say that when I was doing work trying to hire firms to do DEI work with SCBWI, the proposal, I met a lot of looking for proposals to look a particular way and not looking at them if they didn't. And that the people that I knew, one of whom was Rashida Graham Washington, and I knew her freaking brilliance that she was bringing. And there was this lens of looking through it that didn't see that. So that's one thing I'm trying to keep in mind while looking at these as well.
Okay. All right. Next, we'll go on to Dieters and Todd. All right, any initial thoughts, observations, comments? Besides, I always like a good Gantt chart, but that's neither. It did jump out at me that they did not get my name right though on the Gantt chart.
Gantt charts are not my love language. That
I'm sorry, that's the best sentence I've heard all day.
did not
I
jump
agree. I don't love them either.
did not jump out at me as a reason to go with them. What struck me about this one is it wasn't tailored to us. Now they
Yeah.
have library experience, definitely get that, but this wasn't something that struck me as being well thought out in terms of the Oak Park Library's perspective about how to approach this.
No, this felt very much like they did a find and replace on the last one they sent. And then got Matt's name wrong and then sent it.
It was a nice graphic, though.
As someone who's just looking at a lot of calendars lately, and in terms of lots of contract deliverables and everything like that, it's very soothing to me. But I understand why it's not for everyone. Yeah, no, it was a page and a half, and then a chart, and then their CV. It was. And I will say also it was like the fact that they are both still working in public libraries. It's one of those things. It's like how many plates can you spin at the same time? It's how many things can they keep in the air on that.
Exactly. And Mr. Dieter says that Mr. Todd is good with me, and that, and then the nice graphic, and that was it.
So, okay. Anything else? All right. Then we will go on to EFL. Any thoughts?
Well, I was curious when they were talking about the sweet spot, there definitely was, public sector is big. That was a positive. And they kept referring to in Oak Park. And I was wondering if anybody knows what searches they've done in Oak Park recently. Okay.
I was curious about that too. I thought they would say what examples, and I didn't find that.
I didn't either. And it was
You know-
almost like we should know or something. And that's why I thought somebody else must know something I don't, because
Well, and Suzanne, I thought, okay, have they dealt with the Park District? Anything else in Oak Park? I don't think so.
Well, I mean, I
there's
don't,
so many searches going on in Oak Park right now. So I mean,
I would think if they were involved in any of the big searches right now, they would mention that.
that's what it was this odd, like holding it up like this thing, but not holding it.
so I mean, I don't know if the two responses that I have are significant enough or substantive enough to make a difference about whether or not we consider this firm, but this is one proposal that I thought actually did do a find and replace. Like I really feel like they just like put in Oak Park wherever. And the exact thing that you're talking about, Suzanne, reminded me of when the guys come to my house to try and sell me siding, and they're like, we're working with your neighbors down the street. And we just, so we're in the neighbor, and I'm like, are you though? Are you really working with my neighbors down the street? Or, but they always say that, right? Or they're like, oh, if you want to buy some steaks, we just sold some steaks to your neighbor, and that, and I don't know. Those were the two things. I don't think that says anything. I don't think it says anything necessarily real, but I did not feel that this one was necessarily tailored to us.
So, Suzanne, it was not the sweet spot.
On the diversity side, I only think this jumped out to me because I saw this in something else at work the other day with how numbers work. They said, 50% of our placements are diversity candidates. And then you scroll down to their graphic of diversity candidates, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure you're counting women, and we're already 50% of the population. So over 50%, that's just math. And now I want more information on what do you consider a diversity hire? And is it something that we would consider a diversity hire? Or are you just considering, is every woman that you place, put in your diversity hire pile? Because I feel like that's a little bit disingenuous if you're just going to use percentages.
Particularly since that's one of the problems that's taken place over the last few decades that needs to be adjusted for. Is that when it was, women, that handles it. And it's like, no, that's not the whole picture. I had similar.
Does anyone feel like this one felt good to them? Because I feel like I'm hearing mostly like not so much. I'm in the not so much camp, but if there's an advocate for them, speak up.
The only thing I liked was the consult first, search second, but you can't, but a nice little quip, isn't going to get us very far. But I did like that approach. I was kind of hoping that we'd see a little more of that, but otherwise I had lots of questions.
Next.
Okay. Then Greenwood. Does anybody want to look at Greenwood, or should we just move on to the next?
It sounds like you had nothing.
I'm happy to move on. I didn't even score this one. I just wrote boo. bigger column instead of the score because I was so underwhelmed.
Well, between the fact that they are owned by Kelly Services and they want to charge us $60,000, I kind of, in my head, moved on. I'll be
Okay,
honest.
that was easy.
All right. HR source. Any thoughts and feedbacks? Bueller?
I did like, we'll say in the diversity plan piece that they like really did lean on like first understanding us and our priorities, which I did think was oddly unique among some of the others. I mean, it was lacking some clarity of how that process would be handled. And I feel I didn't score them well on, you know, kind of some structural things, but I liked that tone, comparing it to some of the other reviews.
Okay. Yeah, that did stand out to me as well.
Well, that they, you know, at least had it as diversity anti-racism plan. You know, so they're not just kind of saying DEI, but they're
They might have actually read our website.
right first.
Look through.
Um,
I
but
did
also
like the
just-
option of, no, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, just understanding that the conversation is moving, and that they're not back kind of earlier in the conversation. I appreciated that. And yes, that they read our website and that they want to understand what we're looking for.
I did like that they, I mean, it's an additional fee, but the staff culture assessment, that is something that we can engage in. I liked having that option, and personally, that is something I think I would, you know, as we're looking to the next step, could be beneficial. So, I mean, you know, being on the lower end of the total fee, that additional cost didn't make me think twice about it, but it's just so that was something I did appreciate having in there.
I think if that's to work the way I think it will, I think that will alleviate my one concern, being that while they did read the equity and anti-racism information, they may not have understood it in the way we would like them to put it into practice in searching for somebody. But that may be something that if we're going to deliberately sit down and speak just about the culture, that we can maybe do. And there might be, because they are a little bit more local and seem to have more local library experience, there might be less pushing to get somebody to understand exactly how, you know, this town in this area in this time, how we're functioning or we want to function, than maybe some of the other options. But I think it's definitely something we have to talk to them about.
And Virginia, they have a 630 area code.
Yes.
So nobody else was bothered by the gender neutral approach or the.
The
But
anonymous.
that's what
I
I'm
thought-
saying is we have to talk to them about how they're interpreting, but the fact that they read it to begin with is already a couple steps ahead of the find and replace options we've been presented with.
Is
This
it?
is the one, Madarima. Where was that?
It's in the-
It's page
On page
6.
six.
It's
on
anonymous
page-
resume screening.
Yeah.
I have a
they've
feeling
got-
that's
they've got
something we can
anonymous
tell
resume
them to.
screening, and they've got the gender neutral approach. under sourcing, they've said utilize diverse keywords in search string. I mean, what are diverse keywords? Like, do they use different words for the key? I mean, like, it's just, nobody else is bothered by this.
I don't know.
That
I've
one
been
definitely- that one
through
felt
so
like
many like weird culturally, like what were thought to be culturally competent screening processes that corporations are trying to do to remove.
Yeah.
I mean, this is I don't agree with it. I'm of the same, I think, mindset that you are, Madarima, but I think there are corporate partners right now that are saying, because of those implicit biases, there are candidates that aren't even making it through screening.
Yeah, but you know, Virginia's point was that they read, and that is a good point, that they read our diversity plan. But I'm just curious if anybody reads our diversity plan, how do they come up with? I mean,
Well,
how
is
did they
this,
come up with
is this
this?
part of, is this a
reads to
standard
me like-
practice for them, or is it something they put in response to us? Is it, or is like,
I don't know, but it's not,
are we
it's not
reaching that
unheard
this
of.
is a response to our plan, or is this something that they do generally?
Well,
And
that's
because we're looking at it, we're making a connection that didn't exist.
I mean, we may have to ask them, but in looking at this looks like, oh, we've talked to other organizations that also have this as a priority, and this is some of the stuff that they've asked for. Because, 5 years ago, taking names off of resumes was a thing because you could, it was thought to be something that was progressive at that time. So I have a feeling they have a list of things that other people have requested or recommended or asked for when they were asking for something in this same, request sphere. And they put those out here for us as, we can also do these things based off of this being your priority. I think if we just say, no.
That's not our path.
No, but I understand, but I guess the reason that I'm kerfuffled is because, or I don't know if one person can be kerfuffled, but like the reason that I'm just confused is because I feel like I don't know why this necessarily says that they understand us better than any of the other proposals that we've looked at where we said that they just did a find and replace. Like that's what we're saying they did here too. I mean, just because they,
I think in that one maybe, but if you look at some of the other components, I did feel like there was a flex to understanding this may have been a bad assumption on their part, and I think that's a fair statement. I think the question though is, if you look at some of the other ones, I do feel like they're at least claiming to try to understand us and our values and our mission. I didn't get that at all from the majority of the other approaches.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if anyone feels very
yeah,
strongly
no, I
against that.
guess,
I think
don't-
I'm like taking, maybe I'm like taking an inch and thinking like that's a win.
I don't disagree with your reading. I think that I think that those things are true. I just don't know. I guess I'm not coming to the same conclusion. Like I'm seeing what you're seeing, I think, and I think, I'm seeing that they read our stuff, like the other people don't maybe get us, but I feel like I'm not necessarily seeing the conclusion that because they read our stuff, that this is more reassuring. To me, it's
Right.
like,
Are they
worrisome.
aligned?
Yeah,
I don't remember any of the other candidates specifically really putting in there that they want to add the mission of equity and anti-racism specifically to the job post. I may have missed it. I'm not going to say that it didn't, but that's number 7 on their project scope page, right underneath gender neutral. So no, I don't agree with getting things that are, gender neutral, completely stripped resumes or whatever. But I do agree with, when they're doing the screenings, specifically bringing up, diversity related questions and getting that person's, perspective and philosophy on how those things will dovetail with their job at the library. Like I understand and respect, and I like that they are going that direction. I think they need some help in understanding exactly what direction we want to go. But I am in that list of 8 things there. I am seeing some things that I think are valuable. and that speak to the fact that they want to know what our mission is. They hit some things that were wrong. I'm not gonna say that they didn't, but that doesn't mean that we need to include those things.
Do you think they got confused about the gender neutral and the needing to refer to theirs so that they could be like willing to accept people who are not binary, and they just got it confused with what was done? I missed that.
I
Thank
think-
you, Rima, for catching that,
Well, I
because
think we also look at it as like, these are recommendations that for things that we could do. I think that it definitely does, like, now that it's been talked about a little bit more, I can see why it feels like this is stuff that kind of pulled from what others have done and just kind of putting it in there to maybe check some boxes. But there are definitely, I do agree that there is definitely feels like there's a little bit more thought given into including some of our organizational thoughts and desires in this document as well. And we can make it what, we are paying them, and they're going to, and whoever we pay, we're going to have them do what we want in terms of how to structure this.
So
We're not going to be able to, like, square a circle, make somebody who we feel is not capable of doing what we want. But at the same time,
I guess that's where I'm differing from the rest of the board, is that for me, this is squaring the circle. Like, for me, if this is what you understand to be a true, like, approach to diversity, for me, this is squaring the circle. I understand, I am getting the very clear picture that it's not for y'all, but
no, you're saying it's a red flag, right?
to me, well, I mean, I don't even, I think so. I don't know, but I am saying that if somebody like actually read our materials and then thought that this would apply, to me, that is squaring the circle. Like that, to me, that's like a fundamental misunderstanding of what it is that we're trying to do. So
I mean, just from the perspective of like looking
I
at
get that this is now
a gender neutral, resume. I work with a lot of women in tech, and that's something that they said that they have appreciated before, is when they submit, or if they intentionally submit a gender neutral resume because they work in an area that is male dominated, and they feel like they're going to have their resume read for content more likely if their resume is gender neutral. Is that something that applies to us? No. But when I looked at that gender neutral approach, my thought was, it doesn't really apply to us. But, working in tech, I can see where maybe some of my female colleagues maybe would have appreciated that earlier in their careers. So I don't know that it's all for us. I don't know that it's all necessarily for us. I think it shows that they've at least been trying to think about these things. And they're, as we've said about other things, it's not always for whatever audience. Sometimes we just have to say that's not for us. I think anonymous resume screenings might be useful in other areas, not for us. And we just say, not for us.
Matt, may I ask for a question? It is now 9 o'clock. Can we take a little break? And I would like to ask David, what would he like to see in a librarian?
Okay, we have one more proposal to get through before we take a break. To take like 5 minutes. I'm not sure how that question to David is relevant to the discussion at the time. At the moment.
Surely.
Okay. All right. Can we at least get through the Keister one before we take 5 minutes? Okay. So now the John Keister and Associates feedback. Anyone? I would say I did come at these with a preference for people who had done work with public libraries. I did like that there were libraries in and outside of Illinois. The I will say that I did I know the mayor of Wichita, Kansas, through Young Democrats, and I did reach out to him. I just said, "So, do you have any thoughts?" He goes, "Oh, their city manager ran the process, but he's happy with who they're, you know." So he didn't have any experience interacting with the keys with the search firm. But I just thought it was funny that of all the things. So, any other thoughts?
So what his answer was that they had no problem?
He likes who their library director is, but he did not personally interact with the firm. Their city manager did, and he was the mayor, and he's the mayor. So
Okay.
I will, just to be on, just to be transparent about that. I did, and as we're looking at this, and he is, in terms of where he has worked, I will say that the fact that he has, around Illinois, Wisconsin, but also, next door in Berwyn, and then also in Bellwood, and all the way out in Galesburg. So I think that there is seeing a lot of different scales of what libraries want, of course, not knowing when those searches were done. So other thoughts or about this particular proposal?
Come on, Madarima, come on. Did you love this one?
I'm
Did you hate
all
this
out.
one?
I'm all out. HR took all my energy, as it does, as HR does.
Wait, what?
The
last-
HR one,
The last one.
the HR source took all of our energy, as dealing with any HR department does.
I shouldn't say that. I'm sure HR departments are great. Right, Billy? Sorry about that.
It's a noble calling.
I liked the diversity of community that he had experience in. I didn't, I think as I looked at some of the other things that I appreciated about, the previous one, I felt like it explained structurally, I think, very well the process. It felt less personalized, but maybe comparing with how Madarima and others thought the other one may have misread those attempts. Maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. I thought it was well structured. I appreciated, again, Bellwood and Berwyn are very different communities than Highland Park. And being able to operate in each of those spaces and find candidates that are probably a strong fit for those communities. Those communities all have a very distinct community personality. And I think, that isn't always an easy path to follow in leading these kind of search processes. I know some of the board members for some of those communities. So I respect that. I think I was hoping for a little bit more responsiveness to our practices and some of the priorities we've had for the anti-racism work. And I felt like that wasn't really there. He didn't not talk about it. I mean, there was kind of a diversity is important section.
Mm-hmm.
But it felt a little weak. More, I don't know. I guess I would say on the scale of things, he was one of the higher ones that I, in my review process, because I thought he was well structured and had strong experience across diverse communities. I wanted a little more oomph on the how we're going to do this differently, how we're going to be reflective of Oak Park in the proposal. That was where I felt this one had some shortcomings.
I think that was my only concern. I was like, obviously you do this and you do this often, but how is our search going to be different or unique? Or, how are you looking at our priorities differently from these other communities. And I hadn't considered, Sarah, what you just said is very right. Like, these are very different communities. And if they were successful, to Matt's point, we have no idea when necessarily, but if they were successful, then, they obviously have that understanding. But I kept looking at this going, okay, but where are we in this? Like, where do we fit in this? And then again, I was a little worried because it is really library heavy. And so are we going to miss some of those people that we talked about before who maybe have not worked specifically or have not been dedicated to, libraries specifically? Are we going to miss some of those candidates?
I will, and to your point about like the missing kind of the fine-tuned into what we are looking for, that I would say that on December 3rd, not long after David informed us of his decision, I got an email from John Keister talking about like that we might be, that we'll be in searching for a new executive director for that. So they knew at the beginning of December that we would be doing this search, and our deadline was the end of January, and this was the proposal we got.
Oh,
Huh.
that's
So
not
I
good.
don't like that as much now, Matt.
I don't like that at all.
I know
I'm
my
honestly
camera's not on, but I'm
disappointed.
making a face right now. That's
Yeah, and it's like, but again, it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, when I first read through this, I had forgotten that until like an hour before this meeting, that I had I remember getting an email from one of the firms, and I can't remember which one, but I knew they were in Illinois. And so I just was like checking the names, and they were the ones that popped up. And it's like, this was, I'll be honest, this was one of my top picks until I remembered that. And now I'm not so sure. Because especially as we're talking about like,
Maybe you should have gender neutral screening of these proposals, Matt, and take the first picture of the first page of the resume so you can judge it according to its own merit.
no headers, no formatting, no pictures, no charts.
Just all substance, only to see by the virtue of its proposal. I was kind of with Sarah on this one. I actually thought that this one was like one of the other ones that we talked about earlier. It was, I guess, pithy. It's shorter, doesn't, but it seemed to suggest, a lot of substance and history in this particular area. I'm sorry, I said with Sarah, but Sarah, I think now I'm putting words into your mouth, but I liked this one. It seemed to be sort of cutting more prosaic, but I thought that was okay.
I would also just, and this, I guess, isn't meant to sway anyone in any particular direction in how we're having these conversations, but I do think before we break, and Colleen, I would value you weighing in on this too with your experience, but any one of these processes are going to be as good as the structure and support that we give in laying out our expectations and how we want to work with them. The things that we don't want to be focused on as a board, in my opinion, are managing their day-to-day capabilities. We want to have complete confidence in their ability to manage this process, leverage their networks, support an excellent customer experience for all of these candidates, right? So that we know that they are putting our best foot forward as we recruit. I think there are strengths and weaknesses in all of them. And I think it's a matter of us figuring out like who is sharing with us the right basic fundamentals about how they're going to execute and kind of the culture of their business that we want to partner with. That's kind of my 2 cents, just because I feel like, I think if any of us are looking for like the silver bullet, I don't think we have it. And that's okay. I don't, unless Colleen, you feel very strongly in a different direction. I feel like a few of these are going to be just great, but they're going to take some support from us to make sure that they're great.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think Virginia said this earlier this evening, it's going to be what we put into it. That's what we're going to get out. So, yeah, I think I mean what I'm kind of hearing from folks is that there's kind of a top 3 maybe. Matt, if you want to weigh in on that, but I am ready to just kind of talk through those top 3 and pick one.
So let's take 5 minutes, stretch our legs, do whatever we need to do for 5 minutes, come back, and everybody be ready to share their top 3.
Can I ask a quick question? Virginia, you said something about this one, that if they were successful in these searches, like how do we know that they were successful? And what is our measurement of success?
They had a list of they placed somebody. My success is wholly based off of they put the name on the list on the back page. So
Okay.
if they placed somebody there, then obviously that board or whomever was making this decision was happy with the candidates that they provided. But like I said, again, I think they also had a guarantee. And again, I didn't go back and look for this in the others, but if the candidate doesn't stay longer than a year, then they
I
reopen.
think most of them had it. Most of them
Some
had
of them called it out uniquely, Virginia, but I think most of them have it in their like statement of work.
This one was just
Or we could build it into their statement of work.
There it is. Wow. Okay.
Okay.
That's terrifying that we'd be doing this again next year, but okay.
Well, what's terrifying to me is like every time I see them talking about them doing interviews, I'm like, I haven't seen one that I feel completely comfortable like letting them do our interviews. But maybe that's because I haven't been through this.
These are just
before.
they're just people on paper right now, And I think, and the last time, I'll say this before we break like in the past, what happened was, Alice Calabrese-Berry, who was our facilitator consultant in our search, screened out, she did a lot of this stuff with working on, developing the job description, the postings, putting it out there, and did a first screen of looking through all of received things and just said, okay, these are the people we're not even going to consider. And then did a round of phone interviews with a list, and then brought a list of finalists to the board for us to interview in person. To decide if we wanted to bring them all out and interview in person. And then that's what we did. So I'm seeing similarities in some of the frameworks here of there's a screen, there is an initial piece where they can do some one-on-one contact with those, and then they present with us a list of finalists and we decide what to do from there. So okay, with that.
She did not submit to the RFP.
She did not.
Okay.
I did email her earlier in the when David said that, and I never heard a response back from her. So I don't know that if she was aware or if just wasn't interested. So
Okay. I just was asking because that is one case where we know there was success.
yes. And I also think that, but it's like, as I commented before, I think the word probably got around pretty quickly of David's announcement. And I'm sure if she had heard of it and if she knew about it and was interested, she would have let us know.
Okay.
So, okay. So 5 minutes and we'll be back.
Okay.
So D97 announced their superintendent selection today.
So Matt, how do I go on to the main screen now? I see everybody.
I believe David stopped sharing his screen.
Okay.
So this is now our default view.
Okay.
Yeah, I did. Do you want me to share it again?
I
Please.
don't think that's necessary.
Okay.
What are we hoping to see, Ted?
Well, I just see all of our board members. I just took the dogs out so they could pee in the backyard.
Okay, but
But-
I'm asking but it's like, is there anything from one of the proposals that you wanted to view
No,
again, or?
No, now I just see a different screen. I see chat over here. I see all
Okay,
7
but
of
you
us.
see, then that's
Okay, thank you.
what you should be seeing. Yes.
Okay, and I made myself a gin and tonic.
Okay. So, okay, Virginia, are you back yet, or she might be working on
Nope, I'm
bedtime?
here.
Okay, good.
I'm here.
Okay, so in the chat, everyone type in your top 3, which would be your top half, essentially.
In order, or does it matter?
I don't think, I did not put mine in order. Okay, if you're not comfortable, that's fine. And then, but don't hit enter yet, don't hit, and I'll try and do at least narrow down this, but I'd like to try and get them to all come through at the same time as possible, so folks aren't possibly swayed by someone else's answers. I'd like to try and do this, but I want to also be good with David in terms of, I mean, yes, it will, I did verify this on our break, like when you have private messages during a recorded Zoom, the private messages do appear in like a transcript file as part of it, so they are documented. But let's not, I think David's point is well taken. Let's not try and make it seem like we were trying to not do anything in the process of the meeting. So, especially as we are getting closer to a decision. So, can everybody type in?
So
But if we
Matt,
if we don't have a top 3.
I do not have all of the people here, so I will not be able to vote because I can see the chat on my right and I can see all the people in
So
the
what?
left of my
What?
screen.
I can share the agenda again with the names if that's. what
Yes,
you
go
want.
ahead, David. If you could do that, that'd be
All
great.
right, all right. Let me pull it up again. Hold on one moment, please.
I'm not overwhelmed enough by anybody, and I don't have enough experience in this.
Okay, there's the agenda with the names of the 7 firms.
Thank you. I have to tell you, I have 2 new puppies who need to go out. That's why I had to take the 5 minutes.
Understood.
Thank you, Jody.
Thank you, Jody. Jody put them in the chat as well. Okay, so how about this? If up to 3 of your top choices.
Sorry, Matt, you want us to respond to you or everyone?
To everyone, but don't hit enter yet. Just like type them in, and then when I'll give everybody a minute, and then we'll hit enter, and they'll all come through. Hope of those who are ready to share them can, so we can at least kind of coalesce around. This is somewhat similar to what we did in our closed session around to fill our board vacancy. So, all right, everybody, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 4.
I don't have mine in yet, but
Oh,
okay.
sorry.
And Matt, I will not vote. So sorry.
Okay. Okay. So let's see. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've got 6. Keister's got 6. Carrington, 1, 2.
Maureen, will you
Brad.
bring me joy?
Bradbury Miller, 1, 2, 3. 4,
Yes, we probably
5.
should have listened to Dad at the beginning of the meeting.
No,
Char, 1, 2. All right. Well, that just would have been perpetuating the patriarchy, and we're not going to do that tonight. So it looks like Bradbury had 5, Carrington had 2, HR Source had 4, and Keister had 6. So I think it'd be fair to say our consensus around Keister, Bradbury, and HR Source. Of the 6 who responded, all 6 did list Keister. Ted, do you have any thoughts on? You are muted, Ted.
I agree with Keister. I just didn't want to vote. So thank you.
Okay.
So there's 7.
So does anybody want to go into a little bit more about
seemed like everybody
versus
had Bradbury too, right?
Bradbury was 5. I did
I
not
will
have
say I
Bradbury.
only put in Keister to round out my 3. I was not particularly gung ho about them.
Okay. And I left out Bradbury. I was not I did not put them in my 3. So but again, it's like they probably, if we had done 4, they would have been my 4th. So I think it's
Should we
fair.
discuss Bradbury and Keister then, since those are the top two?
I think that's probably a fair, unless anybody really wants to go to bat for HR Source to bring them into it as well.
I think with Madhurima's strong points, perhaps, I don't know.
That's fair.
Still feel, I think we can be successful, and I'll say it again, like I think any of them can do a great job. I think it's just going to take different levels of support from us in different areas. So I don't have any reservations. What, it's 18,500, including, oh no, Keister wasn't the one that had the separated thing. It was HR Source, right? That was 2-tiered map. So these are all in numbers, Colleen. Okay. And where were they timeline comparison? Does anybody have them up? Like, are we like 3 months to 3 months, 5 months to 6 months? Do we know? Like structurally what they both recommended? I think that's important.
The Keister, the final, they had it out into three brackets: month 1, months 2 and 3, and months 3 and 4. Bradbury had first 30 days, 30 to 60 days, 60 to 90 days. So theirs is basically a 3-month window.
3 month versus 4 months. So
yeah,
relatively close.
So Keister's the one that you said, Matt, they've known for a very long time about this and gave us a very shallow proposal.
I think that's probably I think for how long they knew that there was not more things tailored to us, I thought that was worth mentioning.
I don't know that Bradbury had much that was tailored to us either, though. Like,
No.
I feel like they both were relatively generic. But,
Yeah.
but I think can be coached accordingly.
Yeah.
I don't know that either one of them get points on that, in my opinion, Suzanne. I don't know if you feel differently, if you felt like Bradbury had more personalization.
No.
They both felt a little bit rote.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was underwhelmed by all of them,
In
honestly.
general,
I was really hoping for more. I mean, this position in this community at this time is a really sweet gig, I think. And, maybe everybody's intimidated that David's too tough a act to follow. I don't know, but
Well,
but
I mean, I
I
also
was
think that,
expecting more.
I mean, I also think that candidates are different from search firms.
True.
Like there's
True.
like, I think that we can, I don't know, like we can probably inspire individual people more than we can inspire corporations, which if that's the choice, I will take it. But,
Right.
Virginia, you mentioned that Keister wouldn't have necessarily been in, that you were kind of rounding out with them. Did you have anything that you want to add kind of as to your line of thinking between that?
I mean, just when I looked at their proposal, I wasn't particularly overwhelmed with, like, I wasn't wowed by the proposal. After Matt mentioned that they had known about it maybe a whole month before any of the other candidates, that felt kind of rough. I feel like the one thing we keep coming back to is like, how, did they say anything specific to Oak Park? And in the cases of the other candidates, like, okay, you had like a minute and a half to put this together. Do we understand that some of you did a cut, copy, paste, or, to HR source, you looked at things and you didn't quite interpret correctly? I feel like if Keister, they essentially had a head start on everybody and we still got what we got. That doesn't inspire a lot of confidence. Really, it was, the conversation that we had that kind of brought me around to, okay, if they're the consulting group that we go with, I'm not going to cry about it, but I'm not super excited about them. They would not be my choice. I think what they presented to us was a lot of very traditional, like, in the library system, in the library world, of looking for this kind of candidate. And I understand that is extraordinarily valuable. I just don't know if that's exactly what we're looking for, given the discussion at the top of the meeting, which was, we're willing to push aside a few of those more traditional benchmarks to find somebody that we think is going to fit specifically to what we're looking for in Oak Park. So between being underwhelmed with their head start and the fact that they seem to be fairly pigeonholed in, the library community, I understand with enough information, they could probably go and find the person that we wanted. I felt more comfortable building the picture of the person that we want to other options on the list than to this option.
So David, what would you have done as your RFP?
I don't understand what you're asking me to. I'm sorry.
I'm asking, okay, you've been 9 years here at Oak Park Public Library. What would you have written as your RFP that these people haven't?
Oh, what would if I were submitting a proposal to do the search for you? Is that what you're asking?
Yes. I love that he's thinking about it.
Do you think it's a fair question?
I don't really have an answer right now for you, Ted. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Matt, what was your reservation with Bradbury Miller that it didn't make the list? I see personally these two, like, I see them as the same. It's really hard for me to tell these two apart.
Yeah, for me, it was like I think what jumped out at me was the personality test thing. And it like, and that was just because it was, I think it was Suzanne who said that was kind of a red flag. And I was like,
Oh, right.
and I was like, I mean, it didn't really jump out at me the first time, but it was just like, as someone who has listened and read a lot about the kind of the personality test industry, and I'm kind of like, a little bit more wary of it, but it's like, again, I thought for me, it was, I think that they were probably fourth just because the Carrington and Carrington for me, the kind of it kind of was like one or the other, but for them versus Bradbury, but it was just that idea of that non-traditional approach kind of firm that what we probably would have normally hired is what edged out Carrington for me over Bradbury. But it was, it was, if it was just if I was picking just two, it would have been Keister or HR Source.
And honestly,
So-
I had forgotten that, just trying to keep it all clear.
Yeah.
I had forgotten they were the one with the personality test. Ugh, I don't like this process.
We are
Hopefully
unfortunately
the people
limited
part-
by
Hopefully the
by
people
our-
part will be better.
I'm withdrawing my Bradbury vote for the same. I completely forgot. I can't stand personality tests. I'm sorry. I'm a total
Is-
Gryffindor. No, I'm kidding. Like I
Do you think
can't.
that is something that let's say if that is something we can ask them to not implement for our process? If that is something we can tell them that we don't want to,
The firm whatever firm you hire is going to do exactly what you ask them to do. I mean,
yeah.
you just need to- you just need to be-
Well, let's put it that way though. It's like for Bradbury, if we tell them we don't want to do that personality thing and that is not going to be part of our process,
then they won't
what
do
is-
it.
But
Yeah.
it's part of their
What are your
pitch,
thoughts
though.
It's
I mean,
about
I think
the
it's-
approach. It's about their approach. It's about how they approach thinking through the process of recruiting the correct candidate. So if the other trustees are having concerns about that approach, I would rule these people out.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not trying to convince anybody to it, but it's like, I want us to keep in mind that I'm just trying to make sure that we're all keeping in mind, as David's point is, we are as in much control of this process as we want to be too. So
Yeah, but
yes,
it's nice to get
Yeah.
a leg up, right? Like, it's nice to not like be in control of more of the process. Do you know what I mean? Like the process where we have to tell them don't use a personality test. Like that would be a nice part of the process to not have to, not have to control. Like,
Okay, so then here's my question, because then that takes me back to HR. Between telling Bradbury not to use the personality test and telling HR we don't want stripped resumes, which would you find less palatable? Because now in my head I'm thinking like,
well,
those are the two roadblocks for either one, but 6 of one, half dozen the other. If we're
Well,
going
then
to
let's
tell
go
one
with
not to do
Keister. Let's
something.
go
I'm
with
out. Yeah.
let's go with Keister. Like I don't understand. I mean, like I'm not doing. I did not vote for HR, obviously, and I'm also withdrawing my vote for Bradbury for this reason, because I think that I defer completely to those of you who have more experience with this. I'm sure we can get them to do what we want, but I think it is important the way that they've projected themselves. I think that that's important, and so I'm just saying, if you're asking me directly, I'm saying, let's go with Keister. It technically it has the most votes, and I think that would what was the red flag with Keister? It was that they didn't do a good enough job given how much time they had with the proposal.
For those of you who have reviewed RFPs on a more regular basis, like what is your read on these three, I guess, that we're talking about?
I mean, I'll just say my one caution is like no one who's reviewed an RFP would know what Matt shared, because you wouldn't disclose that someone had like reached out early about it. So I mean, if that was removed from this equation, I think from Keister's perspective, they were thoughtful enough in the way that they laid out their information that allowed us to kind of find an understanding of their evaluative process just based on the competencies in different communities that they've serviced. That's kind of where I found their strength. They also didn't take a lot of risks, right? They didn't put in contentious elements that might have hit us the wrong way and made us feel like they had some preconceived idea about how this work should be done. So I kind of give them credit for that as an RFP review process, because to your point, we're all being hung up on very specific proactive things that were shared. Their kind of choice not to go in that way leans in their favor, because it's kind of in some ways allowed us to say, like, they're going to help let us direct that process. So, in some ways I kind of appreciate their tact, even to your point, Matt, maybe they did have pre-information. We're seeing maybe the pain point of having maybe over-architected responses with the HR source process, right? Where they made assumptions about how we're going to react. So, I mean, I'm comfortable with Keister. I think I'd be happy going forward with frankly, any of the 4 that we're still talking about. I'm less concerned, and I think maybe to David's point, however we dictate to them that we want this process to run is how they are going to execute it. I'm probably a little less concerned, to Colleen's point, about, like, if that's their process, we're somehow over complicating or changing things. All of them are used to being directed by professionals to build their programs. So I really think any one of them is going to kind of get in line. Will some take more support from us than others? Possibly, but we aren't going to know that from this document. So I kind of think that's a little bit of a circular argument.
David, you had your hand. You raised your hand.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm not advocating for any one firm or consultant over another, but since you seem to be leaning more toward John Keister, I would just say 2 things. The first is the reason that he knew or seemed to know about all of this before anyone else is because he is so well connected to the Illinois library community. He knows everybody. He pays attention to everything going on. And he knew, even though I didn't share the information with him personally, he knew immediately that I had announced my retirement. And secondly, the other thing I would just say is that because of all of that, he would be very, very motivated to do a very good job for you and to listen very carefully to everything you have to say. He would want this search particularly to be a very successful one, not only for you, but for him as well.
Okay. So if
Would it make all sense to get a sense of what it's like on the other side of this process from David? Is that appropriate or helpful, or in terms of this decision and what things?
Meaning what from the other side, Suzanne?
Well, just having been someone that was searched, or, was part of this process for this particular library, like what, I think it was Sarah who talked about kind of how they represent us out in the world, and
well, I mean,
what you have, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if I'm getting at what you're really concerned or interested in, but people are not going to be interested in or attracted to or applying for this job because of John Keister. They're going to do it because of the reputation of the library and the community. That's why and I'm not saying this because I think this has happened in the last 8 years I've been here. The Oak Park Library has a national reputation, and that reputation has only grown more in the last 8 years, especially considering the kinds of work that we've done, not only in the area of equity and anti-racism, but in a lot of other areas as well, including our commitment to a social service model of engagement and a lot of other things. So no one's going to be applying because John Keister is doing the search. They're going to apply because this is the kind of organization that they would want to work for. So again, I'm not sure if I'm getting at what you're asking. But
I guess I just meant the process, like with the, having been through the process, like, is there anything that we should be aware of that, is represented or not represented in any of these?
No,
I'm just looking for some way to try and gauge.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I can't.
Is this somebody?
We want to clone you, so I'm trying to figure out how to do that.
You don't want to do that.
No.
Wrong kind of consulting firm, I think. Is this somebody who's going to be able to look outside of the regular?
Yeah.
I feel myself being overruled. I'm trying to acquiesce and come to where the rest of you are on the Keister side of the river. I have weights on my ankles and I don't want to go, but talk me into it. Like, is this somebody who's going to strictly look in the library veins that we know they obviously have access to?
Mhm.
Or are they going to look outside of that? Because if we don't know that they have not just the willingness, but the equivalent ability to do that, then I feel like we're throwing some of our diversity and equity importance and the weight that we've put on that out of the window.
Do any of these though?
I mean, I feel like some of them said like, yes, we work with libraries, but we also work with nonprofit, or we work in more broad areas. But if we're just looking at library sciences, and we've had this conversation a couple of times, that's not a diverse pool we're already pulling from. Are we essentially asking the impossible, saying, hey, use only these non-diverse areas and find us a diverse candidate? Like,
Right.
are we setting ourselves up for failure?
My 2 cents on this is that we give the firm our parameters, what we are looking for in a candidate, and it is their job to help us get to that point. So if we are very clear to whichever firm we go with that our priority is making sure that you're looking outside of those normal library channels, or our priority is making sure that you're thinking outside of just the MLS, then the firm will make good on that based on our parameters. And it sounds like from what David's saying, this person is like highly skilled and can shepherd us through this process. We as a board have a lot of work to do in terms of what we are looking for and being able to clearly articulate that. And I know that the leadership team and the staff is going to be there to help, fill in a lot of the details as well, but it is incumbent on us that we start thinking long and hard about what kinds of qualities we're looking for. And just that, is that MLS degree something that we absolutely have to have, and start being able to articulate it in a much more cohesive way.
And part of me also wonders that, did a lot of us select Keister because it was the last one we did? I mean, it's just, seriously, we're human.
Finality bias.
Just like the first and the last ended up on our list. Was the first because it was the first, and the last because it was the last. Yeah.
I was actually thinking that by the time I got to Keister in the first reading, before we did it as a group, I was a little bit like exhausted, like I don't know that I don't know, but I think that it was our discussion. I take Colleen's point though.
Mhm.
I mean, I think that one, I'm going to be cremated when I die, but if I was going to be buried, that would be on my tombstone. Don't overthink it.
Don't overthink it.
You can have it etched on the urn.
Well, I will admit, I think I'm the holdup. So if I'm the holdup, then I will acquiesce, and I will defer to the brilliant people around me. And
Is the holdup?
I think everyone's decided on Keister, and I'm the only one who's just like really uncomfortable with that choice.
Oh, so you're really uncomfortable with it, not just kind of meh.
No, I think my level of really uncomfortable at this point, like it's really uncomfortable now that we're down to 3. If we were still at the 7, Keister is a meh, which is why it was on my list of 3. So
Who are
like
you?
I said,
if
I
you
wouldn't
are
mind.
advocating, Virginia, who are you advocating for?
I think I would advocate for Bradbury or HR, but I understand the arguments against it, and I don't have arguments to combat those. They're completely valid, and I support and understand why people feel that way. So I understand that. I just Keister was not my favorite, but again, I did vote for them, and I'm not going to cry if they are our choice. I think, like we said about others, if we make a good plan and we go to them with exactly what our priorities are, then we will be able to find our next leader using their service.
Okay. Yeah, I was going into tonight, I was going to be surprised if we were all like, given the proposals that I was reading through, I was going to be surprised if we were, all like, balloons and streamers for, unanimously for one of these firms. They were all imperfect in some way. So what I wanted to make sure we got through tonight was that, we gave everyone a chance to speak on every one of the proposals, that everyone's concerns were heard, that no one was dismissed as we were going through this, because I think that's going to be an important part of this process going through, is to make sure that when we each have our opinions and our feelings as we go through this, and our perspectives, that no one's, everyone has a chance to make sure that they are heard and taken seriously with their concerns and their thoughts. And I hope we got through that tonight. And it sounds like we have come to a consensus, and it is a consensus that reaches out to the farther regions of acceptance, grudging acceptance of the John Keister and Associates, to the point where, is there a motion from a trustee to select John Keister's proposal and initiate them as our provider for consultant for our search?
So moved.
Thank you, Virginia. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Seconded by Sarah. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Will the secretary take the roll, please?
All right, can't get off mute. Matarima,
Aye.
Colleen,
Aye.
Suzanne,
Aye.
Virginia,
Aye.
Ted,
You're muted, Ted.
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
and Sarah's a yes.
Thank you,
uh,
Virginia.
Thank you, Virginia.
Well, that was supposed to say balloons, not gallons. Autocorrect. No
I thought you were going galleons.
No
Talking
balloons.
about
No
boats.
streamers. Don't overthink it.
Okay. All right.
Matt,
Okay.
will you contact John Keister, or is that something you want me to do?
I can contact him.
Okay, great. Great.
And then one last item before we discussion, just brief discussion. I don't, just to get a quick sense, do we, in terms of a search committee, do we want to be this as a committee of the whole, or do we want to do this as sort of an ad hoc committee where maybe 2 trustees and then 1 or 2 stakeholders work as sort of a filter point as our quote search committee? Is there a sense of which way folks are comfortable with going that, or do we want to have this just run all through the board?
Matt, I believe that we had a couple of people who were going to be part of the search committee, Sarah and Colleen, correct?
That was a discussion about drafting the RFP.
Okay.
And that got drafted. So is there anyone who would, I mean, any initial thoughts of if we should run this through just the board, or if we should create a subcommittee, an ad hoc committee that works through with like a stakeholder, couple stakeholders to help coordinate with Keister and some of these other conversations we have.
Well, I have
I
two
think it's-
thoughts. I have two thoughts about this, Matt. I think that it should be committee of the whole for the board. And I think that because we have not decided whether or not to have an interim director, maybe we should have the leadership committee as well. What do you think?
That's going to be a lot of people around a
Of course.
table on this. I think I think 4 or 5 people should be, because this is, I think, going to be based off these discussions. It's going to be helping facilitate feedback from staff, from any constituency groups and stuff like this. This is not going to be like a decision commit, thing. Like the board is going to direct a lot of this stuff, but I want to make sure that there are outside voices outside of the board that are also having direct feedback with the firm and stuff. So like 2 or 3 trustees and then 2 or 3 non-trustee stakeholders as part of a quote search committee.
And Matt, that was just a thought for me. But I also have to say that David Selub has the best video of us all.
Okay. So Virginia, you said you were, it sounded like you were going to say something.
I was gonna ask, between David and Matt, can you speak to sort of what our schedule as a board looks like for this month? Because I think that will dictate how swiftly we can move. If we don't have a whole lot on our plate, maybe we can do this as a committee as a whole. If we do have some other things that we need to take care of as the board as a whole, maybe we do need to focus on getting a smaller select committee that can narrow down some items and then take big items to the regular monthly meeting.
So you're wondering what the work looks like for the February regular meeting?
Yeah, I mean, I know it's not budget season, but we've got to be doing something.
Well, right now there are just a couple of additional policy statements that we're going to bring to the board. I think the more significant one is the policy that Billy mentioned last month, the leaves of absence policy. But other than that, there really isn't any other pressing business for the board for the month of February.
Okay.
This is it. This is, I think, what for the next several months, this is going to be your matter of business.
And this is like our biggest task that we are given as a board of trustees.
Yeah.
And I think we
And-
have.
and-
really
and- yeah, exactly. And if you,
Some of my longest meetings.
you're right. And again, if you want my opinion on an ad hoc committee or a committee of the whole, I've done this over and over again in other places, and committee or ad hoc committees almost always end up creating more work in the end, because typically what happens is when an ad hoc committee does its work and brings its recommendation or its results to the rest of the board, what the rest of the board often does is rehash a lot of what the ad hoc committee had already done. So again, my advice is just make up your minds that you're going to do this all together, all 7 of you as a committee of the whole. And if you can get the work, you're going to have to determine with John Keister what what the real schedule is going to be, but do what you can during your regular meetings. And if you have to call some special meetings to get some additional things done, then call some special meetings. But in the end, you're all going to want to be there. You're all going to want to hear the conversations. You're all going to want to be a part of the deliberation. So just do it together. Just do it together.
I agree. And I think we're a really wonderful board that works well together and has thoughtful, I learn something from other people on the board every time. So I think we use that strength going forward, and I'm fine with special meetings. This is an important task. This is a really critical time for libraries and books right now. And
Oh my God.
we need to do this
Yeah.
right. This is important.
So I'm totally fine with that too. My concern was just on timing. So like Matt, maybe we can like talk a little bit about like how to make sure that we're being responsive to a very involved process over a very short period of time.
Sure. Okay. That'll be something I'll talk with John about. And I'll email him tonight to get that ball rolling, just so that we can start getting all the paperwork finalized and signed and what he needs from us to get going. Any other questions? Okay, one last thing, since we're not doing that, and that's fine with me, committee of the whole works. Think of a few people that would fall in a stakeholder constituency group in the community that we may want to engage with in terms of as part of the search for, what does our next director look like in terms of skill set, vision, things like that, that we would want to engage and get feedback from in this search as we move forward. Just try and come up with a couple names of people we will want to perhaps solicit some feedback from as we go through this process. Okay. And with that, I believe that concludes our agenda for this evening, and I declare us adjourned. Thank you all.
Everybody.
Thank you. Thanks.
I'll